Right, hello everyone. Welcome back to a quick fire review. This time, it's a bit of a cathartic one. I think it's Southend United, a couple of seasons. Let's be honest. To forget for the Shrimpers, it's been a long slog. And one man who I very much feel for, who's been covering this in detail, is Chris Phillips. Chris joins me today to chat about it. Chris, how do we find you, despite all the trials and tribulations that you've had to cover these last couple of years?
Yeah, it's been a few weeks now, so I've had a break from it. So I've almost been trying to forget about what happened and try to get about football where possible. But no, I think the thing where Southend are concerned, it's very sad, it's very depressing, but it's not been unexpected. We saw this coming really from last summer. We knew that this was going to be the case. So
Yeah.
difficult as it is, and as horrible it is, as after 101 years in the football league, it's not come as a surprise. And since the relegation has been confirmed, there has been sort of one or two more positive steps. So it's one of those horrible things now where you start building your hopes back up and start to think that, oh, it's all right, it's going to be okay now. But actions speak louder than words, so to speak. So we need to see this continuing if Southend are to get back onto a solid footing and to start moving forward again, because it's just been 2 or 3 years of absolute misery, and it's been heartbreaking, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult division to get out of the National League, but there are some very big clubs there. You look at the top six at the moment. I think apart from Sutton, they've all been in the Football League in certain my living memory, but a lot of them in recent history as well. So there's going to be some good fixtures, I think, for Southend next season. I'm just hoping, like you say, stability off the field will then be mirrored by some success on it. Let's hope so.
Yeah, fingers crossed. So I think we realise it's going to be a very hard division, and it's one of those that for a year or two it might be quite nice to go to different grounds and play some different teams, but ideally we don't want to be there too long without being disrespectful. We want to be back in the Football League, and we want to
Yeah,
get this moving forward again where we feel like we should be, really, if everything was
yeah.
going properly.
Year three, I think, is where I started getting finding it a bit tedious. And you're like, seriously, another year here. It's pretty difficult. But Oxford did get back. It took us 4 years. So I'm not sure what the average. It'd be interesting to know what the average is. I know Bristol Rovers bounced back first time, so that it has been done. But it generally takes a couple of seasons because some of those sides in there at the moment might be quite set. But anyway, I'm rambling. Let's get to the question. So the first question I'm going to ask you is then performance against expectations.
I think we saw this coming, like I touched on before. Unfortunately, I think in my final column of last or the year before last, now I said that things need to happen quickly if Southend are to stop making this another relegation, to stop it being back-to-back relegations. And
Mm.
unfortunately, that didn't happen. The embargo was allowed to fester on for far too long, and that had a real impact on the season. And it was just one thing after another, really. Just as you thought things couldn't get any worse, somehow or other they would do. And
Yeah, yeah,
I think Southend, realistically, like I said, I cover Southend. I have done for many, many years, and I'm a Southend fan as well. So one way or the other, I've been watching them for 32 years. So we saw this coming. I think it would have taken a hell of an achievement to get out of it. There were one or two things along the way where things could have been done differently, and
mm.
if they had have done, maybe they might have been able to escape. Because the miraculous thing was that Southend was so bad for so long, but ultimately they were only 3 points away from staying up, which is crazy, really, albeit four with the goal difference. But to be so bad for so long and to be that close to survival was crazy, really. And you do look back and wonder what if, but every single side will be doing that in the division. But going back to your question, yes, sadly, it was expected, and it did go the way that many of us thought, and many mistakes were made along the way, which contributed towards that.
Yeah, it was from an outside looking. I mean, I'm old enough to remember you guys with Ricky Otto and Barry Fry's team of in the Championship. I watched them a lot down at Front Park actually. So it is sad to see them fall out in the Football League. Who was the best player during the campaign of not many good points? Let's be honest.
Quite it's quite a hard one to pick, actually. I'd have to say Sean Hobson. He came in and he was from Bournemouth at the start of the season, a young defender, and he had quite a tough debut. There was a goal that Southend conceded against Harrogate on the first league game of the season, and it went viral for. Oh yeah, exactly. It went viral for all the wrong reasons, didn't it? And he was at the heart of that. And being honest, just sort of thinking, what have we signed here? Like, what are we trying to do? But early on, that was part of the problem. Mark Molesley sort of came in with this idealistic way. Obviously, he'd been an under-23s coach. He'd had success with Weymouth, and I think it took him a while to get to the gist of League Two football. We're not going to be able to play this football with the players that we've got in League Two.
Mm.
Top level, and we don't have those players, and that was maybe one of the reasons why it didn't go our way. And in hindsight, I think if you were going to bring Mark Molesley in, you needed to bring in someone experienced alongside him because he didn't know the level. But Sean Hobson would be my choice for Player of the Year. He won it as well on the poll that I did online. I think he got 52% of the votes, and it's well deserved. As the season went on, he looked very steady. Scored a couple of good goals, and yesterday he signed a new contract for 2 years as well. So that was a bit of good news. We had some good news for once, which made him a nice change in Southend's recent history. So he would be the one I pick. He's quite cultured on the ball, keeps it simple, and he's definitely improved. That's the main thing. From the start of the season to the end of the season, he would be one of the most improved players. And I also think there's an awful lot more to come from him there, and I think Phil Brown, as a former defender himself, will be good for him, and it'll be quite exciting to see how he does develop moving forward. And he would certainly be my vote for Player of the Year, but there's not many to choose from.
No, well, the next question is who's the most surprising player, good or bad? Was there a player that stood out in some way, either being really much worse than you thought, or someone who came in and you thought, well, actually, he's not done too bad for himself?
Yeah, we had a few disappointments. I remember signing Kazai Sterling from Tottenham on loan, and I remember being at the club I was there for a function to do mental health, and it came through then. And I remember thinking, oh, this is a good signing. And I remember him being at Sunderland, and I'd always thought he'd been quite good, but it just never happened for him. I think he scored once in 12 or 13 games, and that was in a 6-1 defeat at Colchester in the Johnston's Paint Trophy, or the Pizza Trophy, or whatever it's called now. And I know you don't count them, do you? I've heard you talk about that. So from your eyes, he probably never scored.
No, exactly.
And then we had sort of one or two others. Sort of Rico Fairchild came in, and he was great on his debut, and he didn't quite build on that. And then we had James Olayinka, who was really good in glimpses, and you thought, oh yeah, we got a player here. And then he sort of tired and got injured and fell off a little bit towards the end. So there's quite a few disappointments, but you have to also counteract it by saying it would have been quite hard to come into this Southend side, especially early on in the season, and looked good, because you just didn't get the service, you didn't get the deliveries, you didn't get much of the ball in the final third at all. So while you can say they didn't impress, I think you have to be fair and say you could have had fantastic players in the final third during that point of the season, and it would have been impossible for them to have shone. Towards the end of the season, we had Terrell Edbury. He's probably the smallest professional footballer in the going, very, very small, but he's got the heart of a lion, as Phil Brown likes to remind us. And he's one that sort of caught the eye for the right reasons moving forward. He's had an extra year activated now on his contract, so hopefully he can build on that as well, and that can be one of the ones that we can build upon for the future. So he would be another positive from this season. He missed a little bit of it due to injury, which took a little bit of a while to get back right. But he's one that shone for the right reasons. But unfortunately, there were many more that didn't quite live up to the expectations that we had for them early on.
No, actually, I was impressed with in the defeat at Carlisle, Terrell Edbury. I thought he gave Nick Anderson a right old game, and Nick Anderson was very lucky not to be sent off in that game. Two fouls early on. So, best signing? I mean, I think you've mentioned Sean Hobson, but if you had to pick one other, is there any other players that came in that you thought made any sort of impact?
During the course of the season, I think we signed 20 players in the end, so there was quite a lot to pick from, and it's surprising when you look at that, because for a club that had an embargo for the first sort of 3 or 4 months, to eventually be able to sign sort of 20 players, it seems quite bizarre.
Crazy, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, Akinola came in. That was another disappointment, really. I had really high hopes for him. I was quite excited about that signing, and he ended up with sort of 2 goals. But again, I'll go back to saying that it was very hard to be an attack-minded player for Southend. Sean Hobson is the obvious one. He was the player of the season. James Olayinka had some during his first. He sort of had a first spell, then he got injured, then he went back, then he came back again. But his first spell, he showed real excellence going forward. He had a bit of quality about him, and that was something that we didn't have. So I think there's a player there. I think whoever gets him next season. I don't think he's not going to make it at Arsenal. I'd be very, very surprised if that happened. But he could be a League One, League Two player, and he could be a very good player in the right team, in the right position. And I think he would be one that you could get, and he'd be fantastic going forward in the right team. He's got things to learn for his positionally, getting back in and defensive wise, and being part of the shape of the side and things like that. But I think he would one that you could definitely mould into a successful side. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with him, because I definitely do think that there's a good player in there somewhere, but it needs to be part of the right team and part of the right setup. And
Southend weren't. No, exactly.
I mean, I do wonder when some of these players that were coming in on loan, and I just sort of used to sort of feel for them when you're going 4-0 down after 35 minutes at Port Vale, and you just look at them and you just think, oh, what must they be thinking? But Nathan Ferguson was one who came in the transfer window in January, and he scored a couple of fantastic goals as well, and he showed real promise. So he's one I'm looking forward to seeing again next season. So I'd say he sort of was one of the best signings, him and Sean Hobson for me.
Most impressive opposition player?
So I thought about this, and obviously you look at the sort of obvious ones that you go to the top of the goal scoring charts, don't you, and look at it. But if I'm taking it on face value, who's playing the best against Southend? Quite a lot of players did impress against Southend, unfortunately. But the best individual display, it's a bit of an unusual one. I don't know how well he's been for the rest of the season, but we played Port Vale away. They beat us 5-1, and they absolutely destroyed us. And they had a midfielder called Tom Conlon. And I'm not sure what he's been like for the rest of the season, but he was absolutely fantastic that day.
I think he got in the Instat team of the season, and I think he was voted as their player of the season, and he's just signed a new contract with them to much fanfare. So I think that passes the eye test, actually. He was a very good player for them this campaign. Scored a wonderful goal at Barrow from like the halfway line.
Yeah, he was just brilliant. And I think he scored that day, and everything that they did was just going through him. And he kept it quite simple. We kept the ball, but he was just brilliant, and he tore Southend apart. And yeah, he would be on that game. He would be the best individual performance that I've seen against Southend this season.
What about a team? You say Port Vale took you apart that day. Was there any other team that really impressed you against Southend?
Yeah, Tranmere, actually. They beat Southend twice. I know most teams did, unfortunately, but I remember they came down to Roots Hall, and it was just easy. They almost appeared like they had an extra few gears to go into. And I'm pretty sure, I need to check it, but I'm pretty sure it was the game before they were at Wembley. So I remember thinking, oh, they're not really going to be up for this. They're not really going to want to be playing at Southend on a Tuesday night. They're all going to be thinking about Wembley. They just want to be thinking of that one. They won't want to get injured. It could be a good time to play them. And it was 2-0, and it could have been many, many more. They were just a level apart from Southend. And I'd have to say that they were probably, that individual performance was, team-wise, one of the best. Carlisle also looked really strong when they came to Roots Hall. They looked really good. But it was weird because Southend kind of changed. They went from one extreme to the other. Early on, they were trying to play too much football, as I touched on with the goal that went viral for all the wrong reasons. And they went from that to suddenly being ultra defensive and putting everyone behind the ball. So a lot of the times it was horrible. So it was hard for teams to play against. It was what Southend needed to do. It was what Southend should have done from day one, really. The only way that they could get points with the players and everything they had at their disposal. So a lot of the games were horrible. They weren't very entertaining. They just put men behind the ball and tried to make it as ugly as they could. So it was hard for teams to really come down and show that they were this free flow inside and the things that they could do. But for me, I'd have to say Tranmere when they came to Roots Hall. And I was surprised that they didn't go up, because I remember thinking that night, coming away from that, thinking, well, fair play, we've just been beaten by a better team. There's nothing more we could have done. They were brilliant. And I really thought that they would go on from there. And Keith Hill is one of my favourite opposition managers to interview. He always comes out with some very entertaining lines, and it was sad to see that it didn't work out for him, because I felt for Tranmere as well. Southend could have no arguments about the relegation from League One, but I felt for Tranmere. I thought
same here.
Really fair on them, and I would have quite liked them, with that in mind. I would have quite liked them to have got promotion this year, because I felt sorry for them the way that they were handled.
Yeah, I agree with that. I said on the pod, I really did feel for them how they were treated last season. any team that really didn't impress you?
I have to say Barrow. We beat them twice, which in itself is surprising. And the first one was
Shock.
yeah, it did happen. I have checked. It did happen. And the first one of those, Southend played with 10 men for pretty much the whole of the second half. Greg Halford was shown a second yellow card around the 50th minute mark. But by that point, we were still 1-0 up and managed to hang on with Rico scoring a great goal on his debut. So I'd have to say them. We beat them 1-0 at Roots Hall and then 2-1 at their place. I think they just secured League Two safety. They won at Forest Green, wasn't it, I think, in the week before playing for Southend. So maybe it was a good time to play them. Maybe they'd been celebrating. Maybe they didn't quite have the impetus on the game that if it had, we might have seen a different side to them. But they went 1-0 up. And then Southend came back to win 2-1, which was the first time for about 3 or 4 years that I think Southend had been able to do that. So I'd have to say them purely because they were the only team that Southend managed to beat twice. And the first time we did it was with 10 men, which was quite surprising in itself. So, yeah, sorry if anyone's listening for Barrow, but it's purely because Southend managed to beat them twice.
Indeed, yeah. I think Barrow would have preferred that. I think they started the season quite well, and their performances merited more points. But they did have a period where they looked really bad. They made a bad appointment under Michael Jolly, which has ended in some bizarre fashion, just very, very quickly. So, yeah, I think they'll take some lessons from this season. Hate to ask you this, but what's the worst moment of the season?
Well, I could be here for about an hour. It could be a really good counselling session, and I could talk to you for many, many reasons.
I'm allowing you just one, I'm afraid.
The journey home from Barrow I know I mentioned Barrow and we won, but it was actually the day that relegation was confirmed. And I'd never been to Barrow before, and I'm not even sure it's in England. It's so far away. So we had this sort of 6.5-hour journey home. We'd been relegated for the first time in 101 years. It had been sort of back-to-back relegations, and it was just really horrible. So it was just relegation being confirmed, really. We knew it was coming. We'd known it was coming for an awful long time. But that moment when it was officially sort of confirmed and the other results on the day went against us, I think Colchester got a point and Scunthorpe got a point at Bradford and whatnot. So it meant that Southend United got relegated. So for me, it was just seeing the brackets and the R after Southend United. I mean, it was pretty much done anyway. I think we would have needed like a 8 or 9 goal shift going into the final game of the season. So even if the results had gone that day, it was extremely unlikely. But for me, the worst moment, there's Port Vale away. We were like 4-0 down in no time at all, and it was about -7. Colchester 6-1. There's Harrogate 4-0. We're not spoiled. We were spoiled for choice, really, in the wrong way. But for me, it was when relegation was officially confirmed. And if I'm being honest, it's still hard to take even now, really, as how much Southend means to me. It is horrible. But it's happened, and we've got to deal with it now, and we've got to bounce back.
Yeah, I know that feeling, I'm afraid, all too well. But as long as the club learn the lessons, you can come back stronger. I mean, Oxford have really come back stronger from, if you looked at the years prior to us going into the National League, and then you compare them to the years since. I mean, we've learnt lessons and changed ownership. We've come back stronger. If you put right structures in place, it can happen. So there are potential positives to look forward to from this, and I hope Ron Martin does learn from his mistakes and things look much brighter in the future. This might be a hard one to answer as well, but the best moment of the season?
Best moment of the season, right? So one of them, for the first time ever, I touched the ball during a game. That's always been an ambition of mine, and it's quite a good catch as well. I had my laptop in one hand because there's Colchester away. So I had my laptop in one hand and called it in the other one-handed, managed to throw it back, and then text my dad to say I've had more touches than most of our midfield. So that was quite a good one. But in terms of the actual football, I'd have to pick Forest Green away.
I thought it might be that one.
Yeah, we won 3-1, and Nathan Ferguson, well, to be fair, we scored 3 goals that were really good on the night. Nathan Ferguson scored one from about 35 yards, which was outrageous. And it took us out of the relegation zone. And I remember sort of thinking that night, that's the thing that kills you, isn't it? The hope. And you think, we're we're good now. We're out the relegation zone. We've got the confidence. We can build on this. We can do this. We can do that. And it just never happened. It gave us a bit of a false dawn, really. But as a one-off, I'd pick that night. Forest Green obviously got into the playoffs. They're a very good side. Didn't quite get to the final, did they? But it still showed what they're all about. So to go there and win in the manner that we did, with 3-0 up, scored 3 fantastic goals. So that was probably one of the best performances. And that was one of the better drives home that night. Although I did get stopped by the police, actually, asking why I was so far away from Southend during lockdown.
Yeah, you said I went to watch Southend United play. Yeah, pull the other one, mate. They don't play football. Yeah, pithy reply, was it? Penultimate question then, quickly. Hopes for next season?
I've got quite a lot. It seems to be, and I don't like to say this because I've thought this before, but it does seem to be that lessons are finally being learned. We have a chief executive. We haven't had the chief executive since 2016, when Steve Kavanagh left to join Millwall. And it's always been a bit of a bugbear, and that there's never been that structure in place. People have left in positions of power at Southend, and it's sort of been done sort of papering over the cracks. It's just been sort of added to sort of people that are already there. They've taken on extra responsibilities. But Bill Brown's come in. He doesn't take any nonsense. Like him all over him. I like him. I get on really well with him. So for me, he doesn't take any rubbish. He tells you how he is. He'll make it more professional. He's already talking to players. He's already signed 2 players. They can't be announced just yet because they're still playing in the National League. But he signed 2 players, and normally Southend takes so long with their recruitment that they're still trying to put a squad together 4 or 5 games into the season. And that's been a massive mistake in recent times. So that seems to be learned upon. We've got Chief Executive Tom Lawrence coming in from Gillingham. That's a step in the right direction. We sorted out the manager quicker than normal. That's another lesson. Normally we're 30, 40 days without a manager and things are just allowed to drift. And that's been another problem. So it's just trying to get that solidity that's been missing, that infrastructure and that solid platform to enable the club to have that consistency. I mean, we had like 50 odd players named in a match day squad last season. It was just ridiculous. There's just been no consistency or continuity. It's just been scrambled thinking, and it's just been all over the place. And I think now, wipe the slate clean. It's been rubbish, but let's forget about that. Let's move forward. Let's get a structure in place. Let's do what we've got to do to get this club back into the Football League. It's going to be very difficult. No one, we all realise that. It's a very, very hard league. We've seen the clubs that are in it and can't get out of it, but someone has to. And if Southend can do things the right way and get their recruitment right as well, that's been awful, absolutely awful in recent times. And been one of the biggest problems. The signings that they've made and the areas that they've been looking, it's just not been good enough. So that's an area that needs looking at. And fingers crossed, touch wood, or whatever you like to say, the early signs are quite positive, but they need to be continued. And the club needs to be run in the right way so that the headlines and the focus is about things on the pitch and not what's happening off the pitch. And if we can get that right and get the club moving in the right direction, the potential is there to still have the big crowds at this level. And promotion's got to be the aim, at least. That's what we've got to aim for. We've got to try and get back up, and we've just got to try and get some sort of positivity. It's just been 3 years of absolute misery. It's been so depressing. I have to bite my lip sometimes because I've got family in Ipswich, I've got family in Portsmouth, and I know it's all relative, but I see a lot of these other supporters and clubs on Twitter. Tottenham, I've been where we are. There's a lot of Tottenham fans, and I think there's like 6th or 7th in the Premier League, and it's like, oh yeah, that must be heartbreaking, mate. Yeah, to see that, and it could be. I mean, I've even seen a few Leyton Orient fans sort of moaning about their season, and it could be a lot worse, trust me. But it's happened, and we need to sort of learn from it, forget about it to one extent, but learn from it and get moving in the right direction so that something positive can, at long last, happen at Southend United.
Indeed, and we'll end there. Thank you, Chris, so much for giving me your thoughts on the Southend season. I hope we do see you back in League 1 and 2 as soon as possible. Obviously, League 2 first, but it just, it doesn't seem right. My wife actually bought a Southend shirt pre-season. She made me get one for her. So we'll keep...
Really good kits, didn't we, this year? That was the thing. We actually got rid of Nike, and we actually had quite good kits as well. So That's probably as good as it got.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for your time. And I thank you for all the people who've watched this. Please give the video a like, subscribe to our channel. We'll be back doing more quickfire reviews soon. But to all Southend fans, we hope we'll be covering you as soon as possible again on D3, D4 football. But you can follow D5 football on Twitter for all our National League coverage, which we are going to be ramping up next season. But until then, everyone, goodbye.